Why don't you give birth here?
My husband coldly said to me as I went into labor during our drive. He then forcibly took my phone and drove away, leaving me behind. The temperature that day exceeded 104 degrees Fahrenheit, stranded in the mountains with no means of calling for help. I was on the brink of despair. I couldn't understand why my husband would do something so cruel. As pain and fear took over, I realized something. My name is Grace, a 33-year-old housewife. I have been married for 3 years, and in the beginning, my husband John and I envisioned a hopeful future together. We spent peaceful weekends shopping, cooking, and watching movies. I felt deep love and trust for John, believing that the love we vowed to each other at our wedding would last forever. However, that illusion shattered when I became pregnant. For some reason, John, who had shown me affection until then, suddenly became cold. He stopped helping with household chores and, when I tried to talk to him, he would coldly say,
I'm tired from work. Don't talk to me.
Confused and anxious, I asked him why he was acting this way. John angrily replied,
Pregnancy isn't an illness. Do it all by yourself without being lazy.
From that moment on, John stopped caring about my health and feelings. Despite this, I tried to repair our relationship. I believed that he was just tired from work and that he was simply overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility of becoming a father. Even during severe morning sickness, I prepared meals and did as much housework as I could. However, every time I saw John's irritated and glaring face, I felt the image of his once kind self fading away. Despite these difficult days, my baby grew steadily, and that was my only support. We'll meet soon. I love you, I would always say, rubbing my growing belly. But even as I gradually prepared baby items, John would still click his tongue in disapproval, and sometimes he would even throw them in the trash. I must avoid divorce for the sake of this child, I thought. Despite the hardship, I wanted to believe that John's attitude would change once he saw our child's face. However, he began throwing things at me whenever I defied him, and I gradually lost the ability to resist. One day, as my due date approached in the final month of my pregnancy, John suddenly commanded,
We're going for a drive now.
And began getting ready. I feel like my stomach has been tight since this morning, so I wanted to rest at home, I said.
What? You can't even go for a drive? Or are you just not interested in what I do?
John retorted. No, that's not it at all. Feeling scared by John's sharp glare, I couldn't say anything more. Unable to defy his orders, I reluctantly complied. We drove into the mountains in the scorching heat, with John behind the wheel. The car was filled with an awkward silence, only the music from the radio echoing emptily.
All right, we're here. Hurry up and walk.
John said. Dragging my heavy body, I headed towards the mountaintop. Already exhausted, sweat poured from my body, and I felt breathless. The temperature exceeds 104 degrees Fahrenheit that day, making even the usually cool mountains stifling and suffocating. Let's just finish this quickly and go home. At that moment, I felt a sharp pain that was incomparable to the discomfort I had felt in the car. Startled, I crouched down. Even though John must have heard my voice, he continued walking ahead without concern. I tried to call out to him, but only a faint voice came out. John, please, my stomach hurts. I think labor has started. I hoped that John would help me, but he just stopped and looked at me with a cold expression. There was no trace of love or concern in his eyes. Please, take me to the hospital right now. I pleaded.
What? Why don't you give birth here?
John sneered, looking down at me with a smirk. My heart sank into despair. What do you mean? The baby in my belly is also John's child. I never imagined John could be so cruel.
I have plans after this, so handle it yourself.
John said, forcibly taking my phone from my bag. Wait, what are you going to do with that? I asked.
It's your punishment for using pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework. Reflect on it here.
He replied with a faint smile, putting my phone in his pocket and getting back into the car. Please, wait, John, don't go. I cried out in despair, my voice echoing through the mountains as John drove away, leaving me with no means to call for help. As the heat haze rose and the sound of insects pierced my ears, I tried to seek help, but my strength finally gave out, and I lost consciousness. 6 hours later, suddenly, the phone rang. John's angry voice echoed through the hospital room.
What the hell? You bought a new phone without telling me? And, was a baby born?
This is the police. Your wife has passed away.
What?
John lost his bravado upon hearing the unexpected voice on the other end, and he could only respond nervously.
Anyway, please come to the hospital.
A few minutes later, the sound of hurried footsteps approached from the hallway, and John burst into the hospital room.
Are you the husband?
Ha! Who are you? The police?
John suspiciously eyed the casually dressed woman in the room.
I am Nora, a friend of Grace. She contacted me for help, and I headed to the mountains.
She explained the situation to John.
I rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, it was too late.
Nora lowered her eyes sadly, looking apologetic.
Why was Grace, who was in her final month of pregnancy, alone in such a place?
I don't know. I couldn't ask her that.
I see. And the baby?
Unfortunately, the baby too.
John began to sniffle and then started to cry.
I can't believe Grace is gone.
Are you sure you have no idea why Grace was in the mountains?
Nora slowly raised her head and asked him solemnly.
Of course. I wasn't told anything.
I see. Then, please look at Grace's face.
As John looked at my face lying on the bed, I suddenly opened my eyes wide.
Ha!
John, who had been frozen like ice with his eyes wide open, eventually began to move his mouth like a goldfish, struggling to speak. No wonder, as I was glaring at him with my eyes wide open.
You're alive?
Yes, I am. And thanks to her, the baby was born safely and is doing well. Before I lost consciousness, I realized that the phone John had taken was an old one, so I contacted my best friend Nora for help. I safely gave birth to a baby boy at the hospital. Although I was relieved to be saved, my heart was filled with intense anger and sadness over John's actions. So, I decided to ask Nora for help.
But the police just called.
That was Nora. We set everything up to trap you for abandoning me in the mountains. John's face twitched for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure.
I didn't do anything like that. Grace must be confused.
He smiled at Nora.
There's no way I would do such a thing. I was worried about Grace in her final month of pregnancy and was looking for her.
How can you lie so easily?
Grace, you must have had a hard time too. But I'm really glad you and the baby are safe.
John took my hand and acted as if he were a good husband, which gave me goosebumps, and I shook his hand off forcefully. Enough already. There's someone I want you to meet.
Ha! Who?
At that moment, the hospital room door opened again, and an unfamiliar woman entered.
Ha! Riley?
John's expression froze instantly, a mix of surprise and fear causing his eyelids to twitch. The woman called Riley smiled calmly at John.
John, I didn't come here to see you.
What? What do you mean?
I came to see my sister and her friend Grace.
Her statement changed the atmosphere in the room. You were having an affair with Riley, weren't you?
What?
When I showed your photo to Nora, she said you looked like her sister's boyfriend, so I had her call Riley here. Nora, who had been living abroad until recently, didn't know John's face well. When I showed her the photo again, it led to an unexpected development.
There's no proof.
Trying to cover up, John darted his eyes around nervously. I held up Nora's phone. Can you still deny it after seeing this photo? It was a lovey-dovey photo of Riley and John, with John deliberately removing his wedding ring.
I was shocked when Nora told me. If I had known you were married, I wouldn't have dated you. It's despicable to make me your mistress. That's why I decided to help Grace.
Like me, Riley was also a victim. With tears welling up in her eyes, she clearly expressed her feelings. I was surprised. I never imagined John's mistress would be my best friend's sister.
An affair? No, it's not like that. The only one I love is Grace.
John, flustered by my questioning, couldn't stay silent.
I will never forgive you for deceiving me.
Riley took out her phone and pressed the play button. The voice that came out was John's.
I love you, Riley. Let's get married. What the hell is this? Why did you record this?
Clenching his fists and trembling, John was glared at by Riley with hatred.
As soon as I heard from Nora, I contacted you to confirm if it was true.
Then she played the rest of the recording. It was John, getting carried away, saying,
Grace will soon be gone.
And
I left Grace in the mountains. I'll just have her declared missing.
these outrageous confessions made John turn pale and start trembling. Too bad your plan to kill me failed.
You all think you can mess with me?
He tried to forcibly take Riley's smartphone, but she swiftly dodged. You always think you can take whatever you want from others.
This is all nonsense. I've never met this woman before. It's all lies, obviously.
John, losing his temper, shouted despite being in a hospital room. The hospital staff were peeking into the room from the hallway, but he was too agitated to notice. In your mind, everything is a lie. The affair, the recording, abandoning me in the mountains.
Shut up. You keep quiet.
John seemed to have lost his composure, his pride deeply wounded by being caught in a trap set by someone he looked down on.
Audio can be fabricated as much as you want. It can't be used as evidence.
Oh, really? Do you think the footage from the dash cam won't be evidence either?
What?
The moment he heard my words, John froze, his mouth agape, taking time to understand the meaning. The car. The dash cam should have captured everything clearly.
Ah!
Panicking, John turned towards the door, trying to run to the parking lot to hide the evidence, but Riley tripped him, causing him to fall pathetically to the floor. I already had Nora extract the data. Realizing it was futile, John turned back to face us.
The earlier recording was a lie to reassure Riley. I was really planning to pick you up soon. Please, believe me.
He desperately apologized, but it was too late to believe him now. Oh, even though you didn't contact me for 6 hours?
Well, that was...
Why did you do such a thing? Cornered, John began to cry.
I just wanted to be free. Having a child costs money, right? And Grace started slacking off on housework.
Like a small child throwing a tantrum, he continued to make excuses, pounding the floor.
I was just having a bit of fun with Riley. I never intended to marry her. If I got divorced, there would be rumors at work, and it would affect my promotion.
I felt a deep contempt for John, realizing he only thought about himself.
Please, let's start over.
Even now, he clung to me, thinking that an apology would make me forgive him as before. It's too late. I answered quietly in a low voice, and John looked utterly devastated.
That's too much.
At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and a hospital security guard entered the room. The staff must have called him because of John's commotion.
Wait, please. This is just a marital quarrel. There's a reason for this.
John resisted desperately, but the large security guard dragged him out. The room was once again enveloped in silence. As I shed tears of relief, Nora gently patted my back. Thus, freed from past suffering, I decided to start a new life. A few months later, my divorce from John was finalized. With the evidence, I was overwhelmingly favored in court. John, found guilty, is now paying us $30,000 in alimony and child support while serving his sentence. With the help of Nora and Riley, my son and I gradually regained our happiness. The baby is growing healthily, and smiles have returned to our lives. Through this experience, I decided never to sacrifice myself again, no matter what difficulties come my way. Life is unpredictable. Still, I will carve out my future with my own strength, without entrusting my life to anyone else.
How did you like this story? Please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.